Friends, I would like to share with you a very interesting episode that occurred at Vladimir Putin's final press conference. American journalist Cyrus Simons asked the Russian president an extremely harsh, and I would even say disrespectful question. The general message was as follows. Russia, they say, has achieved nothing, there are problems in the border regions, it is being forced out of Syria, and in general, Putin is going to negotiate with Trump with such baggage. However, the Russian leader, in his characteristic diplomatic but harsh manner, put the interlocutor in his place. Get ready to hear Putin's interesting arguments, as well as my thoughts on current events in Europe. Let's not delay, let's start. Over the past 25 years, the West has continued to live in illusions, forming in its head the image of Vladimir Putin as a politician who is easy to beat in a global chess game. For Western elites, Russia remains something of a regional power, as Barack Obama once put it, a country with a vast territory but without strategic depth. Putin himself was perceived as a figure of secondary importance who would passively watch Russia lose its position step by step. Even the most thoughtful Western leaders, such as Angela Merkel, failed to foresee that for Putin, the concept of Russia's red lines is not just a theoretical thesis, but the basis of his policy. In her memoirs, which she actively promotes, Merkel admits, "We underestimated Putin. We didn't think he would take threats against Russia seriously. No one expected him to act so decisively." The West continued to believe that threats to Russia were just a matter of rhetoric, not action. At first, NATO's expansion to Russia's borders was presented as an exclusively peaceful initiative. This was followed by the deployment of weapons and missile defense systems. But who would have thought that Russia could respond? Even now, when Russian hypersonic missiles capable of destroying strategic targets with frightening accuracy appear on the fields of conflict, surprise reigns in Western capitals. The reaction remains the same. This is a bluff, political analysts from well-known mainstream media say. Russia is just demonstrating its strength, but will not dare to go further. Nevertheless, analysts who assess the situation more soberly warn that such confidence is fraught. Jeffrey Sachs, a well-known economist, said, "The West is making the same mistake as before. It does not take Putin's words seriously. But Russia has repeatedly demonstrated that it is ready to defend its interests." Scott Ritter, a former UN weapons inspector, is even tougher. "Ignoring Moscow is a dead end. Russia has made it clear that its patience is running out. But in the West, they do not notice this. Vladimir Putin himself has made it clear that Russia possesses weapons that have no analogs and is ready to use them if necessary. After the successful use of a hypersonic missile, he stressed that these were just the flowers. His words were very clear. If the use of long-range missiles continues, our response will be harsh. We have the means to shock the world." Interestingly, despite these statements, the West continues to behave as if it has plenty of time and room for maneuver. However, the facts suggest otherwise. For example, the Kinzhal hypersonic missile, which Russia used to destroy a strategic facility, caused a real shock among Western military analysts. One Pentagon official acknowledged, "We are not yet able to effectively counter such technologies." Despite this, the mainstream media continues to say that Putin is overreacting, and his actions are just a game for the public. But how dangerous it is to underestimate such a player, the West has yet to realize. And now let's move on to that very journalist from the United States and his sharp and provocative question. Quote, "Mr. President, you have failed to achieve your goals in Ukraine. A large number of Russian soldiers were killed, one of the high-ranking generals was eliminated in Moscow this week, and the head of Syria, whom you supported, was deprived of power. Mr. President, when you meet with President Trump, you will be a weaker leader in a weaker position. What are you going to do? What can you offer as a compromise?" The president's answer to this question was as follows. "Are you asking what we can offer or what I can offer President-elect Trump when we meet with him? First of all, I do not know when we will meet with him because he does not say anything about it. I haven't talked to him at all for over 4 years. But I am ready for this, of course, at any time, and I will be ready for a meeting if he wants it. You said that this conversation would take place in a situation where I would be in a weakened state. It seems to me that this does not correspond to reality. I would like to note that the persecution of our press, unlike the conditions that are created for you in the United States, is not practiced here. We allow you to work in Russia and you do it freely. Would you really like Russia to be in a weakened position? Judging by your question, yes, but I hold the opposite point of view. I believe that Russia has become much stronger in the last 2 or 3 years. Why? Because we are becoming a real sovereign country. We are becoming less dependent on anyone from the outside. We are able to stand on our feet with confidence both from the point of view of the economy and in terms of defense capability. The pace of economic development, the increase in production, and the strengthening of military power allow us to feel confident. Today, our army is at the highest level of readiness in the world. We can make decisions without looking at outside opinions, but only guided by our own national interests. Meanwhile, discussions are already underway in Russian defense circles about new developments, which, according to the president, are capable of turning the idea of modern weapons around. This statement was a wake-up call, but the West still prefers to ignore the growing technological gap. Interestingly, voices are beginning to sound inside Europe itself calling for a rethink of the approach to relations with Russia. For example, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán recently stressed, "Signals from Moscow have been ignored for too long. It was a mistake, and now you have to pay for it." But such statements are immediately drowned in a chorus of accusations of a pro-Russian position, which only deepens the crisis of trust within the European Union. The escalation of the conflict continues with each round of tension, and it is becoming increasingly obvious that the current crisis is not the result of actions by only one side, but the result of long-term misunderstandings and strategic miscalculations. Western countries continue to blame Russia, forgetting that the roots of many of today's problems were laid by years of ignoring its warnings. Even now, when the devastating consequences of the use of hypersonic weapons have become apparent, European capitals are focusing on sanctions and accusations, instead of looking for ways to dialogue. Perhaps it's more convenient than admitting your own mistakes. However, history invariably shows that there is a price to pay for every mistake. Jeffrey Sachs, a renowned economist, warns, "Dialogue is the only way to avoid disaster." However, these words are not being heeded in the West, and if the situation does not change, we are likely to face an even more dramatic development. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin made it clear that Russia has something to answer with. In response to a question from an American journalist about the capabilities of the new weapon, he stated, "This is a modern, very new weapon. Everything that is done in any field is based on previous developments, but then people take a step forward." The president added that the decision on development and production was made on the basis of in-depth consultations with scientists, engineers, and the Ministry of Defense. In particular, he stressed that Russia has created systems capable of overcoming any air defense, recalling projects such as Avangard. He noted, "This is a gliding unit that does not fly along a ballistic trajectory, but creeps along the ground. We have done a lot to overcome the air defense systems." In his response, Putin also noted the low effectiveness of Western air defense systems, such as the American complexes in Romania and Poland. He said that Russia had long warned about their futility and costs for American taxpayers, but in the end it was forced to create its own systems to overcome these technologies. Now these developments demonstrate real potential and show the West that further ignoring Russia's capabilities would be a serious strategic mistake. Using the example of air defense systems in Romania and Poland, Putin clearly explained the advantage of Russian weapons. Romania has an HP-3 air defense system with a range of 300 kilometers, while Poland has a more powerful system with an interception range of up to 1,000 kilometers and an altitude of 500 kilometers. However, Russian medium-range weapons, including the latest developments, are capable of overcoming these systems. As the president noted, missiles standing at a distance of 2,000 kilometers are inaccessible for interception in the upper stage, and after a few seconds the separation of combat units begins, after which attempts to intercept are useless. Putin also stressed Russia's updated nuclear doctrine. In particular, if countries that do not possess nuclear weapons but participate in aggression against Russia pose a threat to its sovereignty, Moscow reserves the right to respond with a nuclear strike. This also applies to threats to the security of Russia's ally, Belarus, which was agreed with Alexander Lukashenko. The president emphasized that the security of Belarus is considered as the security of Russia. Speaking about international conflicts, Putin rejected statements about Russia's weakness, recalling that almost the entire NATO bloc is actually acting against it. Nevertheless, he stressed that the combat capability of the Russian army surpasses the armies of any other country, and the Russian military-industrial complex demonstrates the highest efficiency, which cannot be said about Western countries. In the countries of the alliance, for example, the cost of one shell has quadrupled in recent years, and even an increase in defense spending to 3% of GDP will not save the situation. Answering questions about Syria, the president recalled that the main purpose of the Russian presence was to prevent the creation of a protected enclave. All the tasks set have been completed. Large groups have been destroyed, and cooperation with the Syrian authorities and the armed forces continues. Russian bases in Syria have become key points for the delivery of humanitarian aid, as well as strengthening the strategic presence in the region. Such a harsh response showed Russia's confidence in its defense capability and willingness to defend its national interests on all fronts. Meanwhile, new data continues to arrive on the negotiations, which seem to be not so much aimed at stabilizing the situation in Eastern Europe as adding intrigue to the political backstage. As always, Donald Trump is in the spotlight, a master of unexpected decisions and extraordinary moves. The American press also does not miss the moment, fueling interest with new details of his meeting with Emmanuel Macron and the president of one of the countries in Paris. According to the leaks, Trump made a statement that probably made the palms of the European leaders sweat a little. According to him, America is tired of carrying the burden of supporting the mentioned country alone, and now all responsibility passes to Europe, and specifically to Germany and France. According to sources, it sounded like an ultimatum. No objections, everything is strictly on schedule. At the same time, Trump proposed to deploy a peacekeeping contingent on the territory of a well-known country. Of course, it is exclusively European, formed from the forces of France, Germany, Poland, the Netherlands, and the Scandinavian states. The plan looks impressive if you don't think about its realism. However, Moscow is known to be extremely sensitive to the deployment of foreign troops near its borders, even if they are called peacekeepers. Subtle hints about NATO will not disappear anywhere, and this was the catalyst for the conflict. It is unclear how Trump is going to convince Russia that such an initiative is not the way for a well-known country to join the alliance. But diplomacy has always been the strength of the former American president, and his confidence in success often overrides any doubts. It is also interesting that Trump allegedly stated bluntly, "No NATO for a well-known country." It sounds reasonable, the alliance is not expanding, but its troops still appear on its territory. Obviously, someone in Washington considers this an excellent strategy. But will the Kremlin accept such a game at face value? At the same time, intrigues are unfolding in Europe. After a meeting in Paris, ostensibly organized in honor of the opening of Notre Dame, Macron went to Poland. Official statements mentioned the discussion of the participation of Polish forces in the peacekeeping mission. However, evil tongues claim that the real purpose of the visit was to try to find out how Warsaw would react to Russia's hypothetical advance closer to the Polish borders. The response of the Polish leadership was unexpected. Donald Tusk said that Polish troops would not be sent to a well-known country. This position was also confirmed by the Polish special services. Poland, as it turned out, prefers not to interfere. But Germany holds a different position. Voices in support of Macron's initiatives are becoming louder in the Bundestag. Deputy Ruderus Kesiewiter, in an interview with Spiegel magazine, said that the German government is obliged to support this plan. In his opinion, 50,000 European troops are exactly what is needed, and training should begin right now so that Moscow does not doubt Europe's resolve. Moreover, he stressed that Germany is ready to provide the famous country with Taurus cruise missiles. However, such zeal raises concerns. Analysts from the United States and Europe cautiously hint that the peacekeeping mission may be only a temporary solution, rather, a pause before a new stage of confrontation. Statements about determination and willingness to rule out nothing are more like a prelude to serious action than to establish peace. Some experts believe that the conflict in Eastern Europe is a reflection of deep contradictions that cannot be resolved through a couple of agreements and the deployment of a contingent. For example, German political scientist Klaus Hoffmann believes that the peacekeeping initiative is just an attempt to freeze the situation so that Europe can prepare for the next round of confrontation with Russia. According to him, none of the serious European politicians expects a quick settlement of the conflict. On the contrary, he emphasizes that escalation is becoming a new trend. French analyst Jean-Paul Delacroix is even more pessimistic. In his opinion, the plans to deploy peacekeepers are nothing more than a game for the public. Most likely, completely different scenarios are being discussed behind the scenes, including increased military support for a well-known country. According to him, the peacekeeping mission is just a distraction. Obviously, such initiatives will inevitably be perceived by Moscow as a threat. Do European leaders really believe that the presence of peacekeepers will not provoke a harsh reaction from Russia? History teaches that attempts to secure Europe often lead to exactly the opposite results. The situation remains confusing. Officially, European leaders express confidence in success, but actions indicate the opposite. Disagreements between EU countries, Poland's caution, German rhetoric, all this indicates that the idea of peacekeepers is unlikely to become a panacea. Rather, it will be another pause in the confrontation, which the parties use to prepare for the next stage of the conflict. The diplomatic games continue, and one can only guess how far their participants are willing to go. One thing is for sure, no one is going to concede in this chess game. Thank you for your attention. Friends, see you later.